Hey guys, and welcome to or back to the Pause of Pursuit podcast with your host, Summer Clark. So today we're going to be discussing why we need to stop with but he does it in training. And we've all said it, I've said it lots of times about Arrow, about Ethel, about Earl, about all of them. And I'm pretty sure I hear it at least once every show from someone, whether that's to me or just in the distance because of my excellent hearing. I'm joking, actually, I have really bad hearing, so I don't know why I just said that, but you get the gist. Everyone says that. Okay, so we're going to be delving into why we need to stop, and instead how we can understand why it's happening and work towards fixing it, basically. But first, the weekly roundup, let's say. So again, the only really relevant thing from my week to talk about on the podcast is agility. So, it was my birthday a week ago. Well, tomorrow for me, because it's Tuesday while I'm recording this. But today for you guys listening, if you're listening on Wednesday, which was fun. Lots of cider and food was consumed. Did some of the bits non-related to agility, but none of you probably care about that. So I'm going to go straight to Wellingborough, which was on Saturday. And we got there for our first run, which was just a normal jumping, because I wasn't doing normal jumping for a while. Expense wise, I was just skipping that. But then I was like, no, wait, I should probably get as much practice in it in the show environment as I can, especially before EO. So I did enter that one. Anyway, we got there and it was absolutely tipping it down. And I was like, I'm not running this. Like, it's just not happening. The ground was already really wet and it was rain like I've never seen rain before. It was so heavy. So we just didn't do that, which left us with two runs. It was Crufts ABC Stakes, which that was my main goal of the day because we won it at Axstane. So obviously I want to keep doing well in those as far as points go. So I was really hoping for that one and we won it. So that was amazing. Then our other run was the KC Stakes, so Olympia, not Olympia. And we've already qualified for that. So it rolls down, so I was just like, you know what, it's just another agility run for practice, isn't it? Anyway, we ended up winning that too. So literally the perfect day. Arrow was phenomenal, and it's just more confirmation that my new way of running and handling him is the way to go, which is with aggression, well, not aggression, but, you know, attacking the course, pushing him for speed like I do at training. Because at the end of the day, he's not the fastest dog on the medium circuit. I still have to push him for speed to make sure we win. Do you get what I mean? So, yeah. Going Gucci. I think we were 6th in the point table before, joint 6th on the point table for medium ABC Stakes, before Wellingborough. So I'm not sure where we'll be sitting now, but hopefully, we'll get through to the semis. We've got 2 more during the rest of the season. So hopefully if we can go clear or at least just get some points in those as well, we'll be well on our way. So that's very exciting. And that's pretty much all the relevant information I've got. I'm at RVA on Friday for Champ and then back at RVA on Sunday for YKC qualifiers. So I'll probably see loads of you there, especially on the Sunday with it being YKC qualifiers. Normally by this time, I've already qualified for things in YKC for Crufts, and I just haven't yet. Because I think I've only done... What have I done? Have I only done 1 qualifier or 2? I've done Nottingham. What was the other one I did? Did I do another one? No, because I didn't do Wallingford because it was a Team GB day. Okay, that might be yeah. And Nottingham was just poles. That was what stopped us qualifying. So I'm a little bit behind, hoping that we don't leave it qualifying for Crufts to dogs in need, like we did with Agility Dog of the Year last year. That was stressful, but if we do, we do, as long as we get it, I suppose. All we can do is try. I'm not even going to comment on anything to do with polls anymore. Like, that's not happening because I jinxed myself last time. We're just going to move on. Right, so let's get into the topic. So let's stop with the but he does it in training. And why should we stop with the but he does it in training? Okay, so I have 10 reasons here why your dog is potentially doing something in training and then not doing it in competition. And then afterwards, we're going to go through potential ways to solve this problem. And again, not a quick fix, nothing is. but just some ideas. So the first one is that you're more nervous at shows and your dog can sense it. Now, this is quite obvious, isn't it? As much as, as hard as we try as handlers, or as experienced as we are as handlers, we are always going to feel a little bit differently, when we're actually in competition. Even I now obviously internally feel different in competition than I do at training, because even if I'm not thinking about it or trying not to think about it, my subconscious knows this is a competition. There's no way you can convince yourself that it's not more important than training. Like, it's that just is what it is. But it's all about learning to control those nerves, okay? So actually, I was going to do the list of 10 reasons why and then do how to resolve it. But I'm just going to do how to resolve it with each point. So again, resolving nerves, it's not really as simple as that, is it? But basically, just get more competition experience, and hopefully, eventually, your nerves will not be as apparent. You'll feel calmer. Your dog will sense that you're calmer, and your dog will start acting more like they do in training, because you're acting more like you do in training, as far as nerves or confidence goes. So, when you're going in for a run at competition, try very hard to act like you want your dog to feel, act how you want your dog to feel. So if you want your dog to feel confident, you need to act confident and try and find that confidence within yourself, if that makes sense. So that's quite a hard one to resolve, but that is definitely a reason. There's only so much you can do to resolve it, but that's definitely a reason why a lot of dogs, I think, do better at training than competition, because their handler is super nervous in competition and that unnerves the dog, and basically. So, number 2 is that there are way more distractions at shows than in training. This one's obvious. So, people walking past, other dogs walking past, dogs running in other rings at the show, sounds. So, obviously the other dogs barking, people shouting, people talking, literally everything. The noises you hear at a show, and smells as well. Obviously, all the smells of all the other dogs. Like, there's way more dogs at a show than there is in your one training class, probably. So the smells of the dogs in the air, on the floor, in the ring, on the start line, that's a big one. Arrows had issues with that. So yeah, it's only natural, especially if you're newer to agility, for example, that your dog is going to be more distracted in competition and not distracted at training, hence why they probably behave better in training. Again, the main way to fix this is simply, do more competitions to build that experience, and your dog will get used to those distractions and working through them. Number 2 is introduce those distractions if you can in training. So, for example, maybe get your trainer or other people you train with to keep their dogs out, or get their dogs out and walk them around the ring at your training, and maybe get people to talk a bit louder or anything like that. There's only so much you can do, again, to replicate a show environment, and it's never going to be exactly the same. But at training, try your best to replicate a show environment. And I was going to say one other, but that comes later. But yeah, so yeah, you gotta admit, your dog's going to be more distracted. There's more going on at a show. There always is going to be more going on at a show than training. But if you can, just keep competing, and your dog will get used to them, work them through it, and then try and make your training environment similar to a show by adding those extra distractions if and where you can. So number 3 is that this is the one I was about to say. You haven't generalised your dog's agility skills in different locations. So if you go training at your one training venue every week, and it's the exact same venue every time, it's the exact same equipment, that's another thing, if equipment's different. So if it's the same every time, of course your dog's going to do well every time, because they know what to expect. And it's like if we did the same agility course almost every single time. Like, if every single time we ran a course, it was the same course, we'd be mega handlers. We'd have it down to a T. That's the same as our dogs doing agility at the same venue. They get it down to a T because it's exactly the same, So you've got to generalise. So that means going to different venues to train. So you can go on training days with top handlers. There's so many of those around the country all the time going on. There's so many of those. And also, obviously, going to more competitions. So getting your dog's experience up, again, as I said earlier, in different environments by attending different competitions. So make sure that you're mixing up the venues that you train at and compete at on a regular basis. So exposure, basically. And then equipment as well. Equipment is always different, isn't it? You've got all the different types of equipment. So where you can, try training on all of the types of equipment. So you've got your First Contact, you've got your Gallican, you've got JDA, you've got Adams, you've got all the things, doggy jumps, etc. So different shows have different types of equipment. You can pretty much always see what type of equipment a show's going to use on a schedule before you enter. So if you enter a show and you see that it's got a certain equipment, either, you can ask on Facebook, ask around if anyone's got their own equipment that is that equipment and ask to go train on it. That's pretty much all you can do, to be honest. And then again, like before, just keep going to different shows with different equipment. And naturally, your dog should probably start to realise that, it doesn't matter what kind of seesaw it is, equipment-wise. It may feel different, but it's the same exact, the dog needs to perform the same exact behaviour on every seesaw, according to your cues, etc., because the cues stay the same. So, yeah, you haven't generalised your dog's agility skills in different locations as far as the actual venue goes, and also you haven't trained on different equipment. That's an easy fix. Do agility in more venues, and there's so many agility venues these days. Competitions are at all sorts of different venues, and like I said, most shows have different equipment, so it is very easy to generalise as far as location and equipment goes. That is very much within your control. Number 4, your dog never gets a reward for doing certain behaviours in the ring. This is really obvious, right? Say if your dog has a 2-on 2-off seesaw, and every single time at training, your dog gets a treat placed on the target at the bottom of the seesaw. Of course, when your dog goes to that same training venue with that same seesaw in that same environment every week or whatever, however often you train, your dog's going to think, every time I come to this venue and I do this seesaw, I get food on the end of it. Okay, so your dog goes to competition and your dog has never, ever received a treat on the end of the seesaw, never mind the fact that there isn't a target there either. Because obviously you're not allowed. You can't fix that part of it, okay? So your dog's going to think, one, they're probably just going to think it's completely different requirements. They're probably going to think, I don't have to do that in competition because there's no reward for doing it. And that's just one of those things in that sense, okay? So, however, you can kind of help resolve this by attending training the ring shows. And a lot of shows are starting to do, or some have always done, to be fair, training rings at their shows. So if you go to a show with a training ring, use it, or purposely go to shows with training rings that advertise that in the schedule, or on the Facebook page. Often shows are very proud of the fact that they have one of those rings and will shout about it, rightly so. It's very helpful. So you'll know, so enter those, so you can reward your dog in a show environment, or you can enter the train in the ring shows. Like, there's specific train in the ring shows that are held purely for that reason, so you can literally quite easily enter those, and then you can reward your dog in the ring. I did loads of these with Arrow. I don't think you're allowed food in the ring, I'm not sure actually, but you are allowed toys. I don't know actually, I really don't know, I might have to check that. Or you can check that if you want, save me the effort. No, I'm joking. But either way, you can reward your dog in the ring. You can, reward and play and have a break in between in the run, if that makes sense. So your dog feels like it's more at training. So that's another way as well to sort of make your dog feel like they're the same thing, if that makes sense, training and competition-wise. So that's pretty much all you can do, because obviously you can't reward in a show environment. The only other thing you can do is say, hold your dog on a contact, for example, and praise or pat or stroke or whatever. That's as far as you can go reward-wise, but it's not quite the same as a dog getting food or a toy, is it? So yeah, all you can really do about that is train in the ring shows and training rings at shows. The other thing is holding criteria, but we'll come on to that in a later point. So number 5 is your dog enters the show ring in a hyperactive state. So this kind of feeds into the distractions point that I made earlier. So at training, you drive to training in the car, your dog is nice and chilled out and relaxed in the car. And then you get to training, it's a familiar environment, there's not a lot going on. Your dog's in a calm state of mind, they have been the whole journey, for example. They get out the car, you probably have your little routine. Again, another point for later, but still worth slotting in. Oh, I'm yawning. Oh, sorry about that. It is 6:30 p.m. bedtime. Anyway, no, I'm joking, I haven't eaten yet. Gotta eat. I haven't eaten my tea. Right, I have just gone off on a complete tangent and lost where I am. So your dog right. So for example, it's a show morning. It's probably going to be early. You're probably going to be rushing around a little bit before you leave, packing, etc. The car journey is probably going to be longer than normal. Okay, and this whole time you're probably a bit more on edge than you would do going to training. You get to a show. Your dog is like, oh my God, this is so exciting, new environment, all these distractions. Your dog's going to enter the competition ring in a different state of mind than at training. They're going to be a bit more riled up, okay? Either riled up or more nervous, okay? So it depends on the dog, but your dog is going to be more, so not necessarily hyperactive, just more emotional then. Your dog's emotions are probably going to be heightened at a competition in comparison to at training, because there's more for their brains to take in. Okay, so if your dog enters the ring in that sort of over-aroused, stimulated state, they're going to have way more of a hard time concentrating and focusing on the task at hand, because their brain is too busy thinking about everything else and how exciting or scary the situation is. Whereas at training, the agility and the actual behaviours have your dog's full focus, because that's literally all they do at training. That is the purpose. They're bored of everything else. They've already seen everything else over the weeks, years, whatever. So yeah, there's not too much you can do about that. A bit like the distractions thing, it's a case of just showing up, entering more shows, getting your dog more experience in that kind of environment, in the show routine, the whole day. And then they will get used to it, as will you, which will help with their mental state as well. But you could try changing up your pre-run routine, and this might help to sort of get your dog in a better headspace before you run, for example. Like with Arrow, I always get him out quite a bit earlier than his run and walk him round more mentally than anything, so that he's taking it all in. He's already, kind of got that excitement out of his system. Used to be nerves, but now it's excitement. Happy days. Anyway, yeah, so while he's walking around the show, he can take it all in. So that when it comes to the actual run, he's like, oh, bored of everything now, seen it all, smelt it all, etc. I can just focus on the actual agility, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so a pre-run routine might help your dog to enter the ring when they do actually start to run in a better headspace to concentrate. So the next point is your dog is of a nervous disposition and doesn't feel safe at shows. So this was Arrow to a T, as we all know by now. He was extremely nervous of pretty much life in general, being a lockdown puppy and stuff. As we all know, you're probably sick of hearing me tell that story. So if your dog doesn't feel safe at a show, again, the natural instinct of wanting to stay safe is going to take up your dog's entire brain capacity. And they're just going to be thinking about how they can stay safe, avoid danger, because they're feeling danger, because they're like, oh my God, this is terrifying. So that's obvious. And again, the way to improve that is to do all the things I've already said about generalizing behavior, socializing your dog, taking your dog to different places so that they can get used to all these things that they deem as scary. which is why Arrow was like that, because he missed out on that initial socialisation because of lockdown. So it's a prime example of what happens if your dog isn't exposed to all these things on a regular basis, especially at a young age. But the other thing is just work them through it, keep entering shows, don't bloody give up, and eventually your dog will be like, this isn't so scary. Again, not a huge thing you can do about it, but it's more so that you can understand, you know, your dog's not going to be nervous at training, or if they are, well, they'll get used to it, but your dog's more likely to be nervous at a show then, let's say. So you got to understand that, like, your dog's going to do it right at training if they're not nervous. Whereas if they're nervous and scared of the environment at a show, they're not going to be able to do the agility skills to the same level, okay? So you just got to persevere, but that is definitely a potential explanation. So number 7 is you don't stick to your dog's criteria at shows and regularly let them get away with not meeting it in the ring. I'd say this is probably the biggest reason why dogs do it at training and don't do it in the ring. At training, like we said earlier, they do their criteria and they get a treat for it, or their reward immediately, usually. So why wouldn't they? Whereas at competition, not only do they never get a reward when they do the criteria, but often, for example, seesaw, your dog is automatically already less likely to do that two-off position and stay there until you release them on the seesaw, because they're so excited, because it's a show and not training. It's new, it's exciting. Even if it's not new, there's just more excitement in the air, more for them to take in and think about. They're less likely to do that position. So when they don't do that position, and it's a chain, okay, so they don't do that position, but it's a competition, so you're like, oh, keep going. And you don't make them do their criteria. If this happens regularly, they're going to learn that I don't have to do the criteria when I'm in this environment. Why should I? Never get a reward, and my handler never makes me anyway, like makes me redo it. Or, you know, there's nothing about that situation that'd make them want to do the criteria or even know that they have to. They probably think that that's good behaviour. They probably think, well, the handler's never done anything to let me know that they want me to do that criteria, because, you know, they initially said it, but when I broke it, they were fine about it and we carried on, and I got technically reinforced with being able to run the rest of the course. And then you come out the course and get the reward. So realistically, if you think about it, that's then going to be a bit of a chain, isn't it? It's going to be a bit of a pattern. Your dog's be like, right, training, you know, my handler always makes me do criteria. If I don't do it, they put me back on, because you don't get E'd at training, do you, for putting your dog back on contacts, etc. So always have to do it, and then also get a reward for it. Win-win. Always going to get your criteria at training. Competition. You never make them redo it if they don't get the criteria. And then if they do, they wouldn't get a reward. They don't get a reward anyway. So you got to understand that. So again, the only thing you can really properly do in that situation is make your dog do its criteria. I know you're going to have to throw some runs, but we've all been there. You know, if your dog doesn't stop and it's 2 on 2 off on the seesaw when you say it, put them back on, you know, and then be like, wow, good. You know, and if your dog gets the criteria first time, be like, wow, good, maybe stroke. Yes, you're throwing the run, but you're also saying to the dog, this is something that you have to do. That doesn't need much more explaining, I don't think, because it's obvious and it's very, very common. And I think every single one of you listening will have been in that situation at some point. We hate to hear it, but it's just something that you've got to accept. You've got to go through that short-term pain for long-term gain, as they say. Again, a bit different with really nervous dogs. I haven't always made Arrow stick to his criteria, especially on the seesaw, because he's so scared of it and he stops like just after the pivot point. So I've kind of I haven't made him do the 2 on 2 off at the end, because I just want him to get it over and done with so that he stops obsessing and overthinking it. So it is dog dependent, but mostly if your dog's being naughty on their criteria, then it's probably because you're not making them do it in the ring. So, number 8, your pre and post run routine is different at shows to what it is at training, like we said earlier. So maybe you do a certain thing before you run your dog at training, but then you get to a show and you don't do that at all. You just get your dog straight out and you rush to the ring and you do it. There's the problem. Or you do a completely different pre-run routine at competition. Again, there's the problem. You know, if you do the same pre-run routine every time before you run, your dog's going to associate that with agility and think, I'm about to do agility. Helps to get your dog not only physically warmed up and ready, but also mentally ready in advance, which really, really will help with their concentration once they actually get in the ring. So that's actually quite big. I'm a big advocate for pre and post run routines, warming up, cooling down, not just getting the dog straight out the vehicle and expecting it to run and then putting it straight back, etc. Not only is that horrendous for them physically, but also they're never going to perform well mentally. That's like if you were woken up out of bed in the morning and made to do a gym session and then go back in your bed. Like, that gym session would not be good and you'd probably hurt yourself for a start, but you wouldn't be in the right headspace because you're half asleep. You've just been laid there. Do you know what I mean? So find a pre and post run routine and you're probably wondering why a post run routine makes a difference. But again, it's all part of the process. Dogs love routine, my dogs know when it's tea time. Ethel starts whining, Arrow starts kind of standing in the kitchen looking at you. He's quite silent, bless him, but you can tell he wants it around tea time. So our dogs know routines. So we need to make that pre-routine, then they have their run, and then the post-routine, and then that's what they know as agility. And it just helps them mentally warm up and cool down, get ready, and sort of get that stress out of them afterwards, etc., ready for the next run. So you need to find a pre and post run routine that works for you and your dog. Trial and error to start with, and eventually you'll find something. But yeah, that is way more important, I think, than people give it credit for. So number 9 is that you handle differently at shows due to wanting to go clear. And I've only just broke out of this myself. So, for example, I was handling Arrow safely because I wanted to clear in competition. In training, I wasn't handling him safely. I was pushing him for speed. I was testing I was using the skills that I know we have. But in competition, I was too scared to. I was like, nah, we can only do that in training. And agility was going worse when I was doing that. Like, being desperate for a clear round and handling for a clear round made me less likely to get a clear round. Whereas as soon as I started handling the same as I do at training in competition, we've started getting way more clears. Our runs are way better quality. We're faster. Everything's just way better. And no wonder. Your dog is probably, your dog's so used to you handling a certain way at training. And then they get to competition and all of a sudden you're handling differently. Like, how's your dog meant to... It's like your dog has to learn 2 different styles of handling from you, which is super hard. Like, if you think about it, that's really hard for them. And you can't expect them to perform the same correct behaviours to the new handling that you do in competition and transfer between the 2 different types of handling, but do all the same things right. Like, that is a lot harder for them, mentally and physically, to be honest, than if you handle consistently the whole time. So I think that's a big one. And often it's a subconscious thing. Like, we don't realise, we don't go into a competition thinking, right, I'm going to handle differently for a clear now. We just do. Whereas once you kind of realise and the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, you acknowledge what you're doing, you can change it. Like I did. I was like, wait, I'm handling so safely and then not at training. Then you can change it. Then you can handle the same as you do in competition. Like, you can force yourself to handle the same as you do in training at competition. Issue resolved. So that, for me, that's quite an easy one to resolve, I think. You just got to get in the headspace. And again, it's harder at first, but you just have to push through, force yourself to, and then it becomes second nature. And agility is so much more fun. So I highly recommend for a variety of reasons. All right then, the 10th and final point is that you haven't gradually built your dog up to a full course in training and they're used to getting rewarded or having a break more frequently between obstacles, for example, like maybe after 5 obstacles and then another 5 instead of like the whole 20 in one go, do you know what I mean? Or however many. This is more for people and dogs that are slightly maybe newer to agility. But if you've basically gone from doing, say, 5 obstacles and then rewarding your dog and then having a break while someone else goes at training and then doing another 5 do you get what I mean? If your dog is only used to sequencing, that's the word, a small amount of obstacles in one go before a reward and a break, and then you suddenly go to competition and your dog now has to complete 20 odd obstacles before they get that reward and that break, they're probably going to struggle to not only physically get around the course in one go with ease, but mentally concentrate and focus throughout the whole thing. And I think this is why we often see dogs, especially newer dogs, maybe get round the first, few obstacles or whatever. And then nearer the end of the course, for example, or the middle, you'll see them kind of lose their head a little bit. And especially young dogs, like they're having to focus for longer than they used to, which again comes with practice. But just make sure that at training you are training those full courses. And I know, like for example, I can't access a full course that regularly. I have my group training classes once a week, and then I hire the field about twice a month, where I can to also run full courses. But, if you're just doing a small amount of obstacles or just training small skills at training, and then you go and try and run a full course without having trained full courses in a training environment, then really you can't expect your dog to do that. You have to be regularly running those full courses and for you as well, like getting the stamina, getting used to you concentrating for that long and remembering courses, etc. So yeah, that's a big one that, again, especially for newer handlers and dogs and younger dogs, that I think people might forget, is running courses is a big thing. It's a big thing. They're long courses. They're very long-ass courses. So just make sure that you're training your actual courses, your full courses, not just your skills, basically, outside of competition. And guys, that is all the points. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you learnt a little bit, and I hope that kind of gives you more of an insight as to why your dog does it in training and not competition, because I just hear it a lot, and I think, and I have done it many times, but sometimes we need to step back and think, yeah, but why does he do it in training, if that makes sense? So there you go, just some food for thought, things to think about next time you compete and your dog doesn't do something they've done in training. Think back to these 10 points, take a breath and think back to them, and then make your plan to move forward and sort it out. So that's it then. You know the drill. Please do leave the Paws in Pursuit podcast a rating or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That would mean the world to me. Follow me on all the socials. You can find me at Paws in Pursuit on pretty much everything except Facebook, which is Summer Ruby Clark. But I'm pretty sure most of you already follow me and friend me on everything anyway. But gotta slip it in there for the outro. Next week we should have an exciting guest. I'm going to be talking to Isabella Cox all about becoming the 250 junior world champion at the World Agility Open this year. So that is so exciting. Look forward to that in a week's time, guys. I am trying to get more guests on where possible, but I'm really looking forward to that episode. So yeah, I won't keep you for any longer. See you next Wednesday, guys. Bye.